don't have a uniform set of we don't have a uniform set of values as a nation anymore. We don't have like there's not a common set of values, set of beliefs that bind the American people together anymore. It just feels that way. And the other part of it is that as a nation, we were actually set up to be relatively free. And this is something that you don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it. We can argue about what the proper role of government is in our lives, but if you read the founding documents and if you read the Federalist Papers, things that the founding fathers wrote at the time of the nation's founding, and all those different things, if you study that material, then it's very clear that our government was designed to play a relatively small role in our life. That was how the government was set up. That's how it was supposed to be. And there are far too many people on both sides of the political aisle, both Republican and Democrat, who feel that the government is supposed to be playing this huge role in our lives. And that's a major problem. We have two political parties in this country right now who don't view the government the way that the founding fathers intended us to view the government. And so what you have is two factions fighting over control of the country. And when I say control of the country, I don't mean we're going to win the White House, we're going to control the House and Senate. I mean actual control. We are going to control all the different aspects of the economy. We're going to get into people's personal lives. We're going to do all these things at the federal level. And so that creates fear. Fear creates anger. Anger leads to hate, right? We've all seen Yoda's speech on this, right? So the reason we're so dysfunctional, the primary reason, what I would point out as probably the top reason that we are so dysfunctional is, of course, it's not going to work well when we are literally in a place where we feel like we're fighting for our very survival, right? So you take all these, you can take the most controversial issues, right? And you could say, all right, let's take abortion, for example. And you go, all right, Roe versus Wade got overturned. If I'm a woman, I think there's a war on women's bodies. Personally, I think overturning Roe versus Wade was the right decision. I think that turning it back to the states was the right issue. I don't think it's a federal level issue, and let the states vote on it individually. But at the end of the day, if we're supposed to be free people from an abortion perspective, my view on this is as a pro-choice person who thinks that we should really be focusing on eliminating unwanted pregnancies. And I don't think the argument about abortion is necessarily the right conversation to be having, but you can't force it here. You can't force a free person to grow another person inside their body against their will. It's pretty simple. To me, it seems pretty simple, but it's a complex issue. It's virtually intractable, and we're going to continue to fight about it. But to me, it's not a federal issue. So you have the federal government playing a huge role in our economy, huge role in our personal lives. And so when the issue that the president, whoever's elected as president of the United States, is consequential, is severely consequential to individual people, the political party that's in control of the federal government is viewed as incredibly consequential to the individual American. That's not how we were set up to function. And so, of course, we get frustrated with the federal government. Of course, we get all this anxiety and anger and all these emotions. We get into our feelings, as we like to say, because at the end of the day, the government's not supposed to be doing all these things. We're supposed to have a little bit more control over what is happening in our lives at a personal level. But we have exported all this power to the federal government, which is large and unwieldy and corrupt and works for corporations. And we all know that to be true. And we don't know how to solve the problem. So we're dysfunctional because we're literally forcing ourselves into a situation where we've created an imperial presidency and an imperial federal government that is not responsive to the people, that pulls trillions of dollars out of the private economy. I don't think most people believe that the government is efficient. I don't think most people believe that the government is is good, that it's inherently doing good things. Most people on both sides of the political aisle would say we need major reforms in the government. We got to get rid of these people and put the right people in charge. Both sides will make those arguments. Both sides will talk about cleaning house and putting the right people in the right positions. Milton Friedman would talk to you about it's not about that. It's not about having the right people. You're not going to have the right people. The government's inherently built almost to be corrupt. And the more we centralize power at the federal level, then the more we're going to have these issues where there's going to be this money flooding in, where people are going to be predominantly interested in, and when I say people, I mean politicians are going to be influenced by this money. This money is going to continue to flow into. I think there's something. I think there's something to be said where it's something like 70% of the time, 70% of a politician's time is spent fundraising. They spend the majority of their time trying to keep their jobs, not doing their job. And so it's an interesting. You can't have a functional government that way. But then on the flip side of it, you have all these rules, all these regulations where it's like you can't function in day-to-day society. You can't do anything. We've been boxed into this tax slave, wage slave world where it's virtually impossible to get out of. They control our currency. The spending is absolutely out of control. I'm going to pull up a story here. This is what. Let me see here where we're at. Let's see. No. So Donald Trump is considering Jamie Dimon for Treasury Secretary, right? Here we go. Donald Trump closes up to Wall Street and eyes Jamie Dimon for Treasury Secretary. A little compliment goes a long way, and Donald Trump is no exception to the rule. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO and chairman Jamie Dimon is finding out as much. In an interview with Bloomberg Businessweek, the former president seemed to be warming up to the Wall Street titan for a spot in his potential cabinet, a position that Dimon has not gone on record as vying for. This isn't your guy who's going to drain the swamp. Nothing says drain the swamp like hiring a Wall Street head of a bank. Typical. I mean, this is a very standard revolving door of we're going to bring in one of these big bankers, a Jamie Dimon, to run the Treasury Department. Will you tell me where the change is? This is what gets me about the Donald Trump movement, about the Donald Trump people. As a libertarian, is I've never voted for Donald Trump. Probably not gonna. I can't see myself voting for him this time. What gets me about Donald Trump and the Trump people in particular is this idea that this guy's going to come riding in on a white horse. He's going to drain the swamp. He's going to turn his look. We have 4 years of Donald Trump presidency to look back on and go, okay, this is the guy. This is who he's going to be. He is a very standard issue. He's a very standard issue Republican. He's a moderate Republican. He's going to govern as such. There's no reason to think that he's going to be anything else. That's the guy. That's who he is. It's who he was. We have a 4-year presidency to look at and go, this is who Donald Trump is. On the flip side of that, and I say it over and over and over again, the derangement syndrome that Trump is going to do all these things. He's going to be this dictator. He's going to blow up the country. We're not going to have a democracy and all that nonsense. We have a 4-year presidency of Donald Trump to look back on and go, well, that's not really the case. I think it's funny that this Project 2025 thing is getting so much attention. Somebody just mentioned it in the comments. This is not a Donald Trump thing. This is Heritage Foundation. It's a conservative think tank. We can go out to if we want to go out to every far right and far left think tank and the ideas and the things that they'd like, and then attach that to a politician. Yeah, you can drive yourself crazy. I think Donald Trump's ideas are bad. I don't have to look at Project 2025 to go, hey, this guy's got bad ideas. I can just say, look, he wants to throw tariffs on China. But guess what? So does Joe Biden. It's not Biden's economic plan and Trump's economic plan are not that different. Let's put tariffs on China. The degree of tariffs is different. Let's screw around with the marginal tax rates. right? We're going to move it a little here, a little there, but not significantly. And that's it. There's no grandiose, let's balance the budget. Let's reduce federal spending by 30%. Let's get our spending level back to what it was prior to COVID. Nobody's talking about that. Neither of these guys are saying, here's what our federal budget was prior to COVID. Let's get it back to that point. Let's get this thing under control, because we're racking up $1 trillion in new debt every 100 days or some nonsense. It's out of control, and nobody's talking about it. Neither of these guys wants to talk about reforming Social Security and Medicare. These are broken systems. These are Ponzi schemes. They're not working. I think I'm 48. I've contributed to Social Security for over 30 years. And right now, when I'm projected to reach retirement age, Social Security is not projected to pay the benefits that were promised to me. It's a broken Ponzi scheme. I've said this a million times, if your financial advisor handled your investments the way that the government handled Social Security, your financial advisor would be in jail. Period. And the answer to that is what? Let's tax people more to fix this system? No, you got to create a system where people can opt out of this program. You got to off-ramp Social Security. We got to sunset this program. It didn't work. Okay, just because it paid out a bunch of people doesn't mean it worked. It's not working. You have these massive deficits. We're paying $1 trillion a year. Over $1 trillion a year. Our interest on the national debt is exceeding the military budget right now. It's never happened before. That's the first time we've experienced this. You have $1 trillion of taxpayer money going to pay the interest on the debt. That's not something that's not survivable. So, and nobody's talking about fixing those issues. Nobody's talking about it, except for the libertarians, and nobody's going to vote for the libertarian, right? I support Chase Oliver. I'm going to do what I can to help his campaign, but no, he's not going to win. He's not even going to get real airtime. So we don't even want to fix the problems, man. Excuse me, but I'm usually not on this early, so I get a little coffee in me. So anyway, that's why we're so dysfunctional. You can't live in a world where the goal is to operate a government whose fundamental purpose is to control everybody. It's to control everybody, every aspect of the economy, every aspect of your personal life, and have a functioning society. You just can't, not this size, unless it becomes totalitarian. And we just implement all of our policies by force on those who are not willing to go along with it. And our government's fundamentally not set up that way. So I wanted to get on and do that rant because I love to rant. I'm also checking out my tech here and seeing how this stuff works. So speaking of so here's the tariff thing that I was talking about, just to bring this up. Let me see here if I can get this to work on the other screen, but I'm going to TikTok here. Yeah, okay, so it's working over here. So here's the deal, right? So Trump's tariffs and what he wants to do. Why is this doing that? There we go. So Trump's tariffs and the things that he wants to do. So as the Republican convention continues this week, candidate Donald Trump's ideas for a second term trade policy look remarkably similar to those of his long gone but never quite forgotten Republican predecessor Herbert Hoover. Hoover's 28 program, higher tariffs across the board. An ancestor of Trump's proposed 2024 program, 10% tariffs on goods from all countries and 60% on Chinese-made products. So this is a replay of the Smoot-Hawley Act. Depression-like policies don't always bring depression-like results, but recent experience at home and abroad analysis. So let's first and foremost, let's just say this. Tariffs make things more expensive for consumers. The end. China doesn't pay for tariffs. We do. Americans are going to pay for this. So Tariffs are a bad idea, period. If you want to make American goods more competitive with foreign goods, then you have to level the playing field in the United States. You have to create a regulatory environment that is competitive. You have to create a tax environment that is competitive. We're going to pay more for labor in the United States. Labor is going to be more expensive here, period. Whether you're a union guy or not a union guy, it doesn't really matter. Labor is going to be more expensive in the United States. So you have to level the playing field in other places. You can't have the strictest regulations, the highest taxes, the highest wages, and then go, China's stealing our jobs. No, we've created a structure and a regulatory environment that makes it, everything we do to make it more difficult to do business in the United States is why manufacturing jobs leave the country and go to other places. Capital is going to flow to the place where it gets the best possible return. And that's not the United, and what you want, if you want to bring jobs back to the United States, if you want to protect American workers, is you have to create an environment where it is competitive fundamentally to do business in the United States. Let me get my other camera dialed in here. Sorry, everybody. You have to create an environment where it's competitive to do business in the United States, where capital wants to stay here. We've got better infrastructure than a lot of places. We've got lower energy costs than a lot of places. We have advantages. We have to maximize our advantages in order to bring. It's not tariffs aren't going to do it. You have to create a business environment where it is beneficial to do to keep jobs here in the United States. So that's a big part of it. Lower growth. Tariffs or taxes on purchased goods. As such, they raise costs for goods, buying businesses and their customers. Examples would include a 10% jump in factories' parts and raw materials costs, truckers' energy bills, farmers' payments for tools and fertilizer, and retailers. One of the interesting things about this article, by the way, for me is when they talk about this, one of the things they don't kind of mention is the fact that that's how all taxes work. Do you understand? If tariffs create lower growth and increase input and output costs, right? So it makes things more expensive for consumers. It makes things more expensive for businesses to do things. All of you pro-corporate tax people need to recognize that the corporate tax does the same thing as tariffs do. So if you understand that you shouldn't be, that we don't want tariffs because tariffs make things more expensive, they slowed growth, all these different things that tariffs are doing. If you're anti-tariff, then you need to be anti-tax in general. Tariff's just another kind of tax on a different type of product. We could sell it a different way, but that's all it is. Anyway, rant over. This in turn means higher costs, lost competitiveness, and lower growth. One recent lesson comes from the first Trump administration's much smaller tariffs imposed in 2018 and 2019. Since then, the U.S. tariff rate doubled. The U.S. manufacturing sector has shrunk from 10.9% to 10.1% of GDP. Tariffs are a bad idea, and if you understand that and you agree that tariffs are a bad idea, then you have to agree and understand that taxes in general, corporate taxes in general, are a bad idea. That's a pretty simple. That shouldn't be a huge bridge for you to leap over. This should be a pretty easy thing for people to understand. Inflation for households. Meanwhile, Trump's 10% tariff on all incoming goods, tea, salt, cars, crude oil, peaches, smartphones, over-the-counter medicine, will raise already elevated store and grocery prices for families. The 2018-2019 round likely added half a point to national inflation, and the second will do more. Analysis from the left, right, and center show a rare consensus. Middle-income families will see their bills for goods rise in a range from $1,500 to $1,700 per year. This applies to all taxes. I don't understand. So if I go to a Democrat right now, if I go to a Democrat and I say, hey, Trump's tariffs are a bad idea because they'll raise costs on goods and services, I don't think a single Democrat's going to disagree with me. Not because they understand the economics of it, because it's a Trump policy. You want to understand why our country's so dysfunctional? This is why. If I go and I say, Trump's tariffs are a bad idea because it's going to make things more expensive, Democrats are going to agree with me. Stop. Corporate taxes are a bad idea because they make things more expensive. No, I don't get the same understanding. So you oppose Trump's tariffs because of these reasons. They make things more expensive. They make things more costly. They slow economic growth. And then you go, you know what we need to do? Raise corporate taxes. There is no difference between the two things. It's the same thing. If you oppose Trump's tariffs for these economic reasons, then you should oppose all corporate taxes for these same reasons. Challenge to the Constitution. from a constitutionality perspective, that's one thing that doesn't apply to regular states. We have the power to tax because we passed by the way, a constitutional amendment had to be passed for us to have the tax system that we have right now. But that's a whole nother stream, to be honest with you. The Republicans' revival of Hooverism is bad news. Whether Trump's proposal will get the same gloomy result President Hoover achieved is uncertain. So this is an article, tariffs are bad. I agree with this article's premise that tariffs are bad, but I agree with it from an economic perspective that taxes are bad in general. Taxes do this. Taxes slow growth, raise costs, make it harder for us to compete. That's what taxes do. Tariffs, corporate taxes, income taxes, all taxes do the same thing. They all function the same way. It's an increased cost of living. It increases the cost of living, reduces personal income. That's what taxes do. So this is this horrible article about, or it's a good article about Trump's tariffs. So let's read the CNN article about Biden's tariffs. President Joe Biden is increasing tariffs at $18 billion in Chinese imports across a handful of sectors deemed strategic to national security, an attempt to cripple Beijing's development of critical technologies and instead prioritize U.S. production. Do you understand the difference of tone when it comes to a Joe Biden tariff and a Donald Trump tariff? Do you get it? The increases will apply to imported steel and aluminum, legacy semiconductors, electrical vehicles. So we're going to tariff the hell out of electrical vehicles while at the same time mandating everybody buy one, which is not, I know we're not mandating, but we've got this EV goal. We're pushing people into electric vehicles. We're building out this infrastructure. And at the same time, we're just going to make them more expensive. Which range from 100% tariffs on electric vehicles to 50% for solar components to 25% for all other sectors. So China's using the same playbook it has before to power its own growth at the expense of others. China is simply too big to play by its own rules. According to the new tariffs, announcing new tariffs during a speech in the Rose Garden on Tuesday, Biden said he seeks fair competition with China, not conflict. Once again, all I can tell you is that you have to make your business environment competitive from a regulatory and tax perspective. You can't tariff your way into a competitive footing with another country. You have to create a business environment that is competitive. Our labor costs are going to be higher than China, so we need lower energy costs. We need a friendly regulatory environment. We need lower taxes on corporations. That's how you bring jobs into the United States. You create a competitive business environment when you're trying to fight for capital that's being invested in economic expansion, and you want that here instead of in China, then you have to create a competitive environment. Instead, tariffs do the opposite. They eliminate competition and say, we're going to do this instead of compete. And like I've ranted, taxes, including tariffs, are a bad thing. China can't be the only country that produces clean technology for the world. We need, a senior administration official said, we need diversified, not concentrated production of our most critical goods and technology. This kind of dynamic we think will produce resilient supply chains and clean technology. We got to unpack. There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, what is the demand for clean technology? And in terms of in an unsubsidized world where we're not subsidizing clean energy, where we're not handing billions of dollars to solar companies and clean energy entities. I don't even like to use the phrase clean energy because there's no such thing. In that world, in an unsubsidized world, what's the demand for it? There isn't, because fossil fuels are still the most efficient way to create energy, period. There's not an argument here. Fossil fuels are still the most efficient way to create energy. And if you're not going to have a conversation about energy when it comes to if you're not going to have a conversation about nuclear power, then you're not really even serious about it to begin with. But let China invest all of its money in clean energy. Let them build wind turbines and solar panels, and let their government go into debt subsidizing these things so we can buy them cheaper. Fine. Why don't we focus on nuclear power in the United States? Because I believe that to be the actual future. You want cheap renewable energy in the United States? It's building nuclear power plants, a ton of them. We should be on a completely nuclear power grid by now. If we hadn't screwed this up 50 years ago, and we had actually continued to develop nuclear power, the technologies surrounding nuclear power would be far more advanced than they are, and we'd have a nuclear power grid, and we wouldn't be worrying about how much our power grid, how much greenhouse gas our power grid's emitting, because we'd have a very clean grid. We wouldn't have to worry about that. So we're competing over something that doesn't even really matter. So let's just start there. Electric vehicles imported from China will see their tariffs more than quadrupled from 27.5% to 100%. Yeah, we want to challenge Beijing's practice of encouraging aggressively low pricing up by domestic EV manufacturers. Well, so we're going to tax the crap out of EVs coming from China, while at the same time, I can't get over this. We're mandating all this expansion of electric vehicles. I don't understand how this makes sense to anybody. We're not going to let China flood our market with cheap stuff for our with affordable products. The last thing we want is to be importing affordable products in the United States. And then at the exact same time, we're going to complain about inflation. Tell me how this makes sense from an economic perspective. Somebody tell me how this makes sense. We're going to combat inflation. We're going to put tariffs on these things. So, oh my God. Folks, looks like I'm determined that the future of electric vehicles will be made in America by union workers, period. Okay, great. That's something I can sell to the workers, but the economics behind it don't make sense. And I don't understand how we get to a place where we're just going to buy into the fact that of bad economics because the right guy's saying it. So you read this article from Microsoft, for whoever this is, The Hill, on Trump's tariffs, and we're talking about creating another depression and Hoover era and all this stuff. And then you look at the article from CNN and it's like, "Boom, we're protecting union jobs. This is a good thing." It just, I don't understand it. I started this out with why is our nation, why are we so dysfunctional? And that's it. So I go back. So let's unwind this. Let's go all the way back to Donald Trump cozies up to Wall Street and eyes Jamie Dimon for Treasury Secretary. So this goes back to the point. He's not the guy who's going to change anything. He's not going to be this great drain the swamp, usher in a new era of cooperation or whatever you think he's going to do is not going to happen. He's just another guy. He's just another guy. There is no talk about how we fix our budgetary issues. There is no conversation around reducing federal spending. He talks a little bit of a game about, shrinking government and firing people and all this, that, and the other, but there's no plan here. And like I said, we have a 4-year presidency. We have a 4-year Donald Trump presidency to look back on and say, yeah, that's obviously not who this guy is. He's obviously not the guy who's going to come in here and just take a machete. What we need, he's not going to be the guy who's going to do what we need, which is to come in here with a machete and gut the federal government. That's what's needed. That's what needs to happen. And he's not going to be the guy who does that. He's just not. So let's go down the list. Promotes perpetual war. I will give Donald Trump this. No new conflicts, right? No new conflicts under Trump. Did we shrink the military-industrial complex under Trump? No. So that is a promotion of perpetual war. Did we stop our weapons exports? No. So, promoting perpetual war, it's not just that we are perpetually at war, that the United States is directly involved in conflicts. That's not the only issue. The other issue is, of course, that you have a war machine in the United States that profits by promoting warfare, and the government's not doing anything to prevent that. So we are the United States is an exporter of violence. There's no other way to put it. There's no kind way to say this stuff. We are an exporter of violence. And so a lot of Trump supporters will point to the fact that the United States didn't get involved in a new conflict during his 4-year presidency. But I would counter that by saying, did our government do anything to prevent the exportation? Yeah, I think that's right. Of violence during his presidency, or did we continue to promote and expand our war machine? And I would say that the answer to that is pretty clear. Never stop spending. look, we've been over this. This isn't. You know, one of the things that gets me about the never stop spending. Oh, look at you guys getting a look at my email here. Let me get that out of there. Let me just get into. Let me just get into one of these things when it comes to never stop spending. This is an important conversation we need to have because one of the lies that we are being told is we talk about budget cuts. Budget cuts. Oh, they're gutting the budget. They're cutting the budget. They're doing this. They're doing that. That's not true. Okay, it's just not true. You look across the board. Look at at the state level, at the local level. Look across the board at spending over the last several decades and show me where spending has gone down anywhere. So you hear a lot about these budget cuts, dangerous budget cuts, so on and so forth. It's not true. There's not this slashing of government spending that's taking place at any level. So the idea that we're suffering through this austerity, and you hear this from like the school, particularly when it comes to funding public education, but when it comes to public education, infrastructure, the highway departments, all these different things, you don't see a shrinking of how much money we're spending. That's not a thing that's happening. You show me the budget where spending is actually, show me the budget on where we've stayed the same, let alone shrunk the budget. The funny thing is if you want to look at a place that's where the budget is relatively stagnant, it probably is the military, but that's pushing $1 trillion a year. Thank God it's not growing. But for the most part, federal expenditures, just like taxes, just continue to go up. The federal government is collecting more money and the federal government is spending more money. And I would challenge you that your state is doing the exact same thing. So the idea that one side wants to slash the budget and the other side wants to grow government, that's a fake argument. That's a lie. Show me the budget. Send me a DM and let me know where I can find this shrinking budget, this magic slashing of government expenditures, that it's a budgetary problem, that we're not spending enough money to solve our problems, which is the Democrat argument would be we're not spending enough money on schools, we're not spending enough money on roads, we need to fund these things. The money's there. It's been there. And the Republicans will make the conversation or make the argument for smaller government, fiscal responsibility, but not carry through on any of that, on any of those promises. And government will continue to grow under a Republican leader. So there's no difference in terms of, from a fiscal responsibility perspective, from the perspective of these guys are good for the budget or these guys are good for our fiscal security. That's just not going to be the case. And history will tell you that. Spies on Americans. This is, for me, from the perspective of privacy, which I think is one of the big, it's good. It's the big issue. And I think that both parties are terrible on this, but so is the Supreme Court. So we have this conservative court now. So there's a shift in the court, but the court's not doing things to protect privacy. Warrantless wiretaps, the FISA courts, all these different things. And this really was, it's not that we weren't doing it as a nation prior to 9/11, but this went into overdrive in 9/11. So you have the NDAA, you have all these, the growth of the intelligence community and all this stuff that happened. And a lot of that took place under George W. Bush, but Obama didn't do anything about that, right? I mean, we didn't do anything. We had 8 years of Barack Obama. He reauthorized NDA. He reauthorized Patriot Act. That stuff exists. Biden 4 years, Trump 4 years. We know it now as Americans. We just know. We take it for granted, essentially, that we are being spied on. That's just, we just know that that's happening. So. And it's not something, it's gotten to the point where we're so used to being spied on, where we're so used to that being part of our, what's going on in our country, that we don't really even fight it. It's not something we talk about enough anymore. Both political parties support these policies, the policy of spying and invading our privacy. Both parties support, like the FISA courts, both parties support these things. So it's not really a question of one group is here for your civil liberties. One of your civil liberties is the right to privacy, right? So show me where either political party is fighting that. So we argue about things like, hormone blockers. We have all these conversations about, trans rights and all these different things. It's like, here's a basic civil liberty that's being violated constantly, and nobody's talking about it anymore. We're done having that conversation. So that's a shame. It doesn't carry on Epstein's client list. For me, one of the things about the Epstein client list and Epstein in general is just the fact that it's like we're not even talking about it anymore. Like, this is a multi-billionaire with incredibly powerful connections to presidents, connections to the royal family, and we're just like, yeah, it's all right. Like, child trafficking is happening. We know it's happening at very high levels, and we just aren't even talking about it. Just think about that think about what our national priorities are when that's not a thing that's like at the top of the headlines. We're like, where's the client list? Who is this guy involved with? You have 2 people charged with trafficking. Where are the clients? And we're not even talking about it. It's not even there. It's not even in I would say that most people, and I will say this, the Republicans are better on this issue a little bit. At least they talk about it. The Democrats don't even talk about it. I mean, they don't even bring it up. Child trafficking is not, and they talk about it as if, and if you hear Democrats talking about it, if you hear it, you hear about it as if it's a conspiracy theory. So it's a really a strange thing in terms of the priorities of the country, that this is just not something we're talking about. So I find that disconcerting, let's say, to say the least. Owned by Big Pharma, of course, we know this. I think one of the things that really, really bothered me is the idea that, during the pandemic, you had a lot of, it became very evident, right? So you had all these news programs talking about the vax and you got to get vaccinated and all this stuff. And I don't have an opinion on it, to be honest with you. Get it, don't get it, I don't care. I've never had the illness. I'm amongst the unvaxxed. I've never had it. I don't have a great deal of fear over it. I'm not afraid of jabs. I was in the military for 9 years. I've been injected with anthrax and all kinds of nonsense. So that's not my issue. I just didn't get it. I just didn't have a great deal of concern over it. So I just didn't get it. So, I guess I'm not here to convince you on that one way or another. What does get me, though, is you have these networks talking about this stuff and putting this stuff out there. And the question I would have is, who's sponsoring these programs? You had people who are selling ads to pharmaceutical companies to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars of ad space being sold to pharmaceutical companies by the programs who are advising you to take these drugs. The pharmaceutical advertising industry is huge in this country. We have evergreen copyrights on drugs, and there's a huge lack of competition taking place right now. The healthcare system is broken in this country. I think that if you fix the healthcare system, if you fix the healthcare system and our food supply, pharmaceutical companies would lose a ton of money. It's in the vested interest of pharmaceutical companies for us to be unhealthy. This is one of the things that gets me. By the way, I'm going to go off. This is an off topic. Insurance companies are the only people in the healthcare marketplace who have a vested interest in you being healthy. Okay, can we understand that for a second? The incentives, the way that the healthcare marketplace in the United States is set up, the way that we've constructed our healthcare marketplace is pharmaceutical companies and healthcare providers, their financial incentive is to sell expensive healthcare to insurance companies. That is their financial incentive. They are incentivized by the way the system functions to sell expensive care to health insurance companies. Health insurance companies are incentivized for you to be healthy. That is their incentive. Yes, of course, they don't want to pay claims. We can have the conversation about health insurance companies denying claims and rationing healthcare and all this different stuff. But if you look from a purely financial incentive perspective, the only people who have a financial incentive to keep you healthy are the insurance companies. And there's a vested financial interest in both healthcare providers and pharmaceutical companies for you to be sick so that they could sell you expensive treatments. That's where the financial incentives exist. And we constructed that. Our government constructed that program when FDR inserted insurance companies into the healthcare marketplace through, I've done other videos on this and I'm going to do another one, but to give you the short version of this thing, we froze wages, we excluded benefits, we gave certain tax benefits to employers to offer health insurance so what that did was put health insurance companies in between the consumer and the provider. So now there's a third-party payer, which creates this perverse moral hazard where the people who are supposed to be trying to keep you healthy are incentivized to have you be sick. That's it. That's the incentive. That's how it's set up. Healthcare, had the government not gotten involved in it, would probably still be a direct-to-consumer product. I've said this a million times. You would be subscribed to a healthcare provider. They would be competing against each other in the open market. You'd be subscribed to a healthcare provider. These people would operate gyms. They'd operate grocery stores. Their goal would be to keep you as healthy as possible so that they would collect the premiums from your subscription, but you would not get sick. That would be their goal. That's how healthcare would be set up. I believe that's how the market would have evolved on its own had the government not gotten involved. But now we have this perverse system where we've literally incentivized healthcare providers and pharmaceutical companies to make you sick. I've talked about the military-industrial complex, how broken that is. The biggest problem I have with it as a veteran is I think that we all recognize the fact that the United States of America exports violence. And that's a sad thing to me. The fact that we are an exporter of violence. And that's, you know what I mean? It's not supposed to be that way. Lady Liberty is supposed to be carrying the light of liberty to the world, not exporting violence. We are merchants of death. And the United States government is a merchant of death. We export violence. And that's really sad. And that's look, Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, these big multi-billion-dollar corporations with multi-billion-dollar contracts with the federal government. They're paying people to get elected. They're buying the ad space. They're contributing to the PACs. We are wholly captured by the military-industrial complex, and I think most Americans are at their core anti-war. I think we oppose. I don't think it's a stretch to say Americans oppose warfare. Most people oppose warfare. It's governments that want war, and politicians who need it to, bolster their campaigns. And so, at the end of the day, at the very bottom, they don't care about you. And I think that's where. And I've said this before, and I'm going to end on this note. We will argue with the middle class guy next door, the guy with a mortgage and bills to pay, who's just trying to put food on the table, who's going to work from 9 to 5. We'll argue with that guy because he backs a different multimillionaire than I back. It's just like sports, man. It's just like sports. We have a ton in common. We have a ton of things in common. If you're a working class American, and most of us are working class, if you get up and go to work every day, you're a working class American. I don't care how much money you make. If you get up and go to work every day, you're a working class American. And we have a ton in common, and we have very little that actually separates us. And most of the things that separate us are relatively superficial in nature. And we fight amongst ourselves over multimillionaires who don't care about us at all, who are not here to serve the best interests of the people, who lie to us, who mislead us, who intentionally, do damaging things to the economy because in the short term, it's going to help get them elected. The average politician's timeline? The average politician's timeline is 2 years. It's the election cycle. So long-term problems like housing, like healthcare, the solutions for those are long-term, and they may even involve some short-term pain. There is no incentive for a politician to put forth a policy that in the long term is going to benefit the American people if in the short term it doesn't help them get reelected. That's another perverse incentive that our system is set up. That's another reason why we're dysfunctional. And that's the problem. So they don't care about you because they can't. They're incentivized to not care about long-term solutions to the serious problems you're facing, because those solutions might hurt, and that doesn't get them reelected. And on that note, on that sad, sad note, I will end, and I will be back tomorrow. And thank you all for tuning in. Thanks to those of you who commented. Thanks for those of you who hung around. I am going to be doing a live stream tonight. I'm really excited about it. Phil Anderson from Wisconsin is running for Senate up there. I'm going to have him on my stream. I'm going to join their podcast, and I'm going to live stream it on my TikTok and YouTube here. So tune in for that. I'll set that event up, and we'll see you guys hopefully this evening.